I guess we just got to start. All
Let's
right.
do this.
All right. Well, this is episode 1 of the podcast. Something I've been wanting to do for a good while now. Primarily, I wanted this podcast to be kind of a filler between the official reviews that I'm doing for the paddles, because, you know, some events happen occasionally, like I review a paddle with the positive review, and then there's some QC issues with the paddle, and it'd be nice to be able to kind of, you know, talk through that in between videos to kind of give people a warning, and also, you know, just to kind of have fun, talk about stuff that in our daily lives that I don't get to talk about in the official podcast and the official videos, right? So yeah, you might see I have a cohort here, Eddie, and Eddie and I, you've seen him in a lot of my videos. We often play together, play against each other. They call him Flying Eddie for his jumping antics. But yeah, Eddie, do you want to kind of give us an introduction about who you are, what kind of your background is?
Well, I started pickleball in 2017, so coming up on 6 years now of pickleball.
Wow.
Yeah, I can remember the exact date. It was March 31st because there was a class at the local gym in Wake Forest, North Carolina, and they got me involved. And at the time, it was, I mean, I think we all know the stories, right? A lot of older folks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's definitely started to skew younger now. But, yeah, I mean, these 60, 70-year-olds were kicking my butt from the beginning. And I thought, hey, man, if they can do that, I should get in on this, right?
Always the hook, right?
Yeah.
You get beat by an elderly person, you're like, I've got to figure out how to redeem myself.
Somehow they were, you know, limping from the car to the gym, and once they get there, they take on a whole new persona.
Exactly. Yeah. You're like, man.
But we've known each other now for, what, 2 years?
At least, maybe 3.
Played a few tournaments together?
Yeah. But yeah, and I think the first time we met on the courts was at Autry, one of the local courts in Superior.
Right.
And I invited myself as the fourth to your game.
Well, you had that crazy chainsaw serve that was still legal at the time that was just destroying all of us. And it was like, oh, John, stop it with that. Yeah, but this is really exciting because the pace of just technology coming out every week, it seems like. There's too much to talk about sometimes. So having a forum like this, kind of a long form, media forum is, I think, great to be able to have the time to really dive into lots of different types of things, not just paddles.
Yeah, if you haven't realized, Eddie is also a total paddle geek like myself. I think
no one's a paddle geek like you, John. So.
I take it to extremes. Yes. I go ham on it. But one of the things I wanted to talk about is which podcasts we're watching right now. So, yeah, what about you, Eddie?
Well, I love the Pickleball Studio guys. I think they're kind of the preeminent social media guys out there, Will and Chris. Pickleball Effect, Brandon and Logan, I think they do a great job. A lot like you, big time geeks in the paddle world. They're all about the metrics and the data, and I really appreciate that, and I think they do a good job of fair and honest, objective kinds of reviews.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm friends with Chris and Will and Braden and all those guys, and I think they have the best podcasts. I also watch King of the Court for the kind of the gossipy stuff. The Dink is good. Who's Rob Nunnery and Adam Stone? What's their podcast called? It's a really good one, though.
Okay.
Like their chemistry is really good. Sorry, I can't remember the name of it. Anything else? Pickleball Arena that you listen to?
I mean, I think going OG, Webby and Eddie back in the day.
Oh, really?
I mean, I used to love following them. And they're still out there once in a while, creating content here and there. But I think, for me at least, that's kind of where I started with the whole video and podcast thing is following those two guys.
Yeah.
Really amusing.
All right. Well, moving on. So
John, what was your first paddle? I mean, I talked about the Z5 and Onyx. There were some other paddles there at the beginning for me, but what was your first paddle?
Mine was the Monarch Mercenary. It was a graphite paddle. I think I bought it at Dick's Sporting Goods for like, I want to say $50, maybe.
Is that the one with the red dragon on it?
I don't think it had a fancy dragon on it.
Okay.
It was kind of white. I've actually got it in my paddle database. I went and grabbed it one day and ran some of the metrics. I don't think I did power and pop on it, but I got spin on it and weight and all that. But
Probably not top tier, I'm guessing.
Not top tier. But you don't know any better when you're just starting. So I played with that for, I want to say a couple, 3 months. And then I went to a Selkirk, and God, I cannot remember which Selkirk it was. It was kind of an elongated, 16 millimeter, I remember that, elongated shape. I cannot keep Selkirk's typology straight in my head. I know it's pretty simple, but they're like non-words, like Invicta with a K. I'm like, what does that even mean? And everything else, it doesn't really relate to what the paddles actually are. So it's like learning new people's names. It eludes me sometimes.
I think my first Selkirk was the Amped series.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
That's what I had too. Now that you say that,
In the epic
Amped
shape.
I think that was mine too.
Okay.
Was it blue? Was yours blue?
I don't remember the color.
Okay, yeah. Then, so my journey through the paddles real quickly is I went from the Selkirk Amped to Electra Model E, and that was a big improvement.
That's a great paddle.
Yeah, that was such a good paddle.
Yep.
Yeah, I played with that thing for at least 6 months, maybe 8 months, probably 8 months. And from that to a Yola Hyperion. Actually went to the Yola Hyperion. There's a CFS and a CAS. I played with the CAS first, and that's the carbon abrasion surface versus the carbon friction surface. So the CAS is not a raw carbon fiber surface. It was like fiberglass with grit glue on it. And I actually loved that thing, and that was when I was still around 3.5 level, and I had both the CFS and the CAS, and I preferred playing with the CAS because I felt like it had a bigger sweet spot, ironically, because it doesn't. The CFS has a much bigger sweet spot because it has the edge foam. And all right, so Yola, Hyperion, and then stuff started happening with my video reviews. I think I just started having paddle after paddle after paddle. But my primaries since then, I went to 6.0 shortly after that. I was playing with the 6.0 Black Diamond, the original Black Diamond, for a good while. Then I went to the Pickleball Apes Proline Energy, and now I'm on to the 6.0 Ruby.
What's the longest you've played with any one paddle consistently?
It was the Model E from Electrum.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot to mention I went from a Model E actually to the Pro 2, the Electrum Pro 2 for a good another 4 months before I went to another paddle after that. So, yeah, Electrum was big in my beginnings.
Yeah.
How about you? Where'd you go from Selkirk?
Oh my gosh, all over the place. Pro Light.
Okay.
More Selkirk. I played with the Selkirk 003 for quite some time. I would say 8 months, which in pickleball years is a long time.
Yeah.
And did great with that paddle. Huge for control. I could put that thing anywhere. Now I'm on to the Gearbox Pro Power elongated.
Yeah.
Kind of the opposite end of the spectrum from the 003, right? But it's treated me very well. Yeah. And the Gearbox is, for me, it's a great paddle.
Yeah, I mean, it is a really good paddle. They had some issues after its release.
I've never noticed any issues, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, I've only tried your demos and the two that I've purchased, and not a single problem.
I know that there was a weight issue, and after Raphael, from the owner of Gearbox, went on record several times saying that that's one of the key indicators of quality for a paddle is consistency in the weight. And then there was like a 0.5 ounce fluctuation in the weight. Then rightfully people got a little upset,
To be honest, mine are right at 7.9.
Are they? All of them?
Yep. Now, has Raphael directly addressed the question about break-in period?
I know that he spoke to Chris Olsen about it. I heard secondhand from Chris Olsen that they talked about it, and Raphael brought it up as a thing that it does take a break-in period. And Chris, I think when he gets back from vacation, he's coming back from Hawaii, I think, soon. He took January off, but he has in the works a video specifically about the break-in period for these Gearbox Pro Series paddles. And they definitely break in. These Gearbox Pro Power versions are the most powerful paddles on the market, and they are. And yeah, in terms of legal
Yes.
USAP that you can use in a tournament. They're just beneath EVA foam paddles in terms of power potential. But one of the unique things about them, and like I talked about in my video, is that there's both power and pop are there, all day with those paddles. So you can serve and drive from the baseline with a full swing, and you get massive power. And you can sit at the kitchen and do shorter strokes, and the pop is there. Usually those two aren't both high on a paddle. There's some rare exceptions, but they happen to be the highest on the Gearbox paddles. But a lot of people hear all the reviewers saying, "Oh my God, they hit like a truck," and then they go buy one or try one, and they're underwhelmed because it doesn't seem like as much power as they were expecting. It doesn't hit, faster than a tennis racket, for example. So, we're kind of tuned into these subtleties of the paddles as paddle reviewers, and maybe we should make more statements like, "Listen, yes, this is the most powerful paddle." But it's a subtle difference between this and the second and third and fourth paddles in that lineup. And by the way, there are some paddles sneaking up on there was kind of a little bit of a gap in power and pop for the Gearbox Pro Series and the paddles beneath it. But that gap is closing with some of the newer paddles I've been testing.
I'd be curious to learn more about what's breaking in over time. Is it something within the structure of the carbon fiber core? Is it adhesives? Is it the face to core interface? I'd be really curious to know what that is.
Yeah. I know a little bit about what Chris Olsen is finding, but I don't want to spoil his, because he actually ran some real tests at Nationals when I was there with them. So I'll let him break that news. Yeah. But he found out some interesting things. The question was, is break-in the new term for delamination, right? So is the core actually breaking? But I'll let Chris break that story. We were going to talk about some of the new paddles we're hitting. Eddie and I just finished a game today, and we were both playing around with a couple of paddles, one of which is the Proton Series 1. And Proton sponsored last year Andre Diescu. He's been playing with that paddle for a while now, and recently they signed Megan Dizon also, and she's playing with it. So if you don't know of this, it's starting to get a lot of buzz, actually, these paddles, the Proton paddles. They have 3 series, so there's Series 1. I'll talk about that in a second, but Series 2 is like a thicker, softer, elongated paddle with grit texture that plays a lot like the Selkirk Lux, so a very control-oriented paddle. I don't think you played with that one yet. And then Series 3 is a raw carbon fiber paddle, elongated version. I think it's 16.5 inches long. It's some kind of non-standard measurement. But regardless, the Series 3 feels very familiar to all of us who've been playing with thermoformed raw carbon fiber paddles. It's really nice, but it feels like a lot of the others out there. And like I said, the Series 2 plays a lot like the Selkirk Lux. Series 1 is quite unique in the paddle space in terms of particularly the surface material that they put on it. It's completely smooth, and it feels kind of tacky, kind of almost rubberized, but it's not soft, like you can't squeeze it, or else that would be illegal with the USAP specifications. But it's got a tacky feel to it. So it puts spin on the ball, not with texture, but in terms of grabbing the ball with its stickiness, the rubberized texture, and spinning the ball. What are your thoughts on playing with it?
Well, playing with it and against it, with that paddle in your hands, the ball was dipping furiously.
Yeah.
I mean, your drives were coming with speed, pace, and tremendous curve. I mean, some of your drives from the baseline, John, were nearly dipping down into my kitchen, which is a little scary, actually. But I would guess the spin numbers on that have to be near top of class.
Yeah. They are, yeah. I'm actually going to do a full review on those paddles soon, but the spin numbers are above 2,300 RPM, which is...
That's insane.
Yeah, there's at the top of the top tier.
And it's controllable spin. I mean, I play a lot of backhand slice on return of serve, and it was grabbing and skidding like no other paddle I've played with recently.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the paddle in your hands? How you played with it?
It feels a little heavy, but I like a little heaviness coming from the Gearbox Pro Power, which I have weighted down to try and bump up the sweet spot a little bit. So I've got a lot of weight on my Gearbox. So I'm used to that weight. I'm used to swing weight, 120 plus.
Yeah.
And this feels no different than that, really.
Yeah, so there are a couple of versions of the Series 1. There's what they call a standard, which is actually a wide body. It's wider than 8 inches wide, and they have an elongated one too. And there's it's confusing, but there's even 2 versions of each of those shapes within Series 1. There's a standard polypropylene honeycomb core, and then there's a Nomex honeycomb core. So the Nomex hits, like Aramid, a really pingy sound and a very stiff face. You get more pop out of it, and then everybody knows what polypropylene plays like. But I'm leaning toward. So they sent me the polypropylene wide body and the Nomex elongated. The Nomex was too stiff for my taste. I mean, I'm sure there are people who would like it, but I'm not a big fan of Kevlar, Aramid, Nomex cores. I love it on the surface, but I'm not a fan of it as a core. It's too brittle, compared to plastic. But yeah, like I said, I'm leaning toward the wide body, and the more I play with it, the more I like it. And I'm not going to switch to it as my primary anytime soon. But the first time I hit with Series 1, I was like, oh, like you said, it did feel heavy, heavier than what you would think a shorter wide body paddle would feel like. But you notice the spin right away, and then you start kind of getting it dialed in because it's not the measurements are all non-standard. The handle length is 5.25 inches. The length, I forget. It's all non-standard, so it doesn't feel like any other paddle, and the materials are different too. I had a really good long conversation with the owner, and I won't get into too many details to spoil the review, but he is a couple of important things about the manufacturing is it's being manufactured in the U.S. and he's opening a factory in Mexico also. So it's here and not in China like most of the other raw carbon fiber paddles are. And also he has a background in the aerospace industry, and he's telling me at least that these are aerospace grade raw carbon fiber paddles, carbon fiber paddles. So even the Series 1 has a layup of unidirectional carbon fiber underneath that tacky material that they're calling nanotach is what they're calling the surface. But underneath it, I actually dissected one earlier today, and underneath it is that standard layup of 90 degrees unidirectional pre-preg carbon fiber. And the carbon fiber, looking at the profile, it does look a little different than all the others I've seen. It's very subtle, but it doesn't quite look like all the others I've seen that I dissected that came out of these factories in China. So, maybe there is something to this aerospace. And I talked with other paddle manufacturers, like Raphael from Gearbox, and he says that no paddles at all, even Gearbox, use aerospace grade carbon fiber. It's all sports grade, which are basically the defects out of the aerospace. The question is, does it even matter what grade the carbon fiber is under, within reason? Clearly, if you put cardboard underneath the surface, that's not going to last. So crappy materials are going to not make a good paddle. But is the difference between aero grade levels carbon fiber versus sports grade carbon fiber going to have any impacts on the playability and the durability of a paddle? We don't know, but it does give me comfort when people actually use the higher grade raw materials.
Not to spoil your video, John, but your thoughts on the design elements of these new paddles?
Oh, yeah. That's a whole nother thing. Still the aesthetics?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, yeah, they're not to my taste. I actually mentioned that. So I'm going to have the second podcast is going to be a interview that I had with Andre and Megan, and they were nice enough to sit down with me, not in person, but we had a Zoom call and recorded it, and they talked about their experience with Proton paddles, and I was honest with them. I was like, I don't care for the looks of the Series 1. To be fair, the Series 2 is very pretty. It's like a baby blue, very subtle color. That's the one that plays like the Selkirk Lux. And Series 3 looks a lot like every other raw carbon fiber paddle. It's a lot more subtle. You can't do much with raw carbon fiber surfaces in terms of design. But boy, they went crazy with the colors and the retro elements of the Series 1.
I think retro is a good word. It seems like they went with the Miami Vice color palette wheel there. But
yeah.
It's not off-putting necessarily.
I talking with Megan and Andre, they're both getting pro signature paddles through Proton, and they can make the design whatever they want. And Andre is just like, I love these designs. I probably want to have a colorful paddle. And Megan was like, I'm going to do something a lot more subtle. Something.
So I wanted to
darker.
ask you a little bit about these pro signature paddles and the relationship these pros have with certain manufacturers. What kind of influence do they have in either design, structurally, dimensionally, aesthetically? Is it all over the map? What is it that they're bringing to the table for these manufacturers?
I don't have good answers to that other than what I've seen in interviews and talking with some pros myself. But I know Ben Johns has a lot of sway in terms of what specification he wants on the paddle. And I think that's why he went to Yola, because they had that history in table tennis, and they were progressive with their materials, and he wanted, he has a degree in material engineering, I'm pretty sure.
From my alma mater.
Oh, really?
Yeah, University of Maryland.
Okay, yeah. But so he's real smart. If you listen to him talking about paddle materials, you're just like, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about. So I think he pushed Yola originally to make that edge foam perimeter paddle, which changed things a lot, and he had a lot to say and to the development of the Perseus paddle also. But my sense is that other pros are probably less knowledgeable than you and I about paddle materials and technology and what plays well, And honestly, a lot of the pros, they're not playing with the best paddles because they're under contract with a paddle company who's paying them really well. They need to get paid, right? So, I won't name the companies or the pros, but there are pros out there who could definitely play a lot better if you put a different paddle in their hands outside of their sponsored paddles.
It is interesting to know that there are some pros, though, like a Ben Johns, who, in certain cases, have quite a bit of influence over product design, and getting things out to the public. What's interesting to me is what's good for Ben Johns good for you and me.
You mean in terms of what difference does a paddle make in the hands of a 4 or 5 level player versus a pro player?
Or Ben Johns' ideal specs for a paddle, are they workable?
Oh, I see.
For the average player, like a 4-0, 4-5 player.
And a whole nother issue is I think a lot of people getting into pickleball initially aren't going to be watching my videos or Braden's videos to figure out all the metrics and which paddles are going to work best for them. They're going to be like, okay, let me choose a paddle that a pro plays with because I know they're the best in the world. And then,
you think that's what they're doing? Because I think like you and, you talked earlier about going to Dick's for your first paddle. I think I went to Dick's for an early paddle of mine. And I think that's true for a lot of people. They hit the big box stores. Mm-hmm. They see something that is visually appealing to them, and boom, they buy it if it's within a certain price point.
Yeah, you're totally right. Total beginners who are just getting into pickleball probably don't even know who Ben Johns is or Anna Lee Waters, right? And they're going to go to Walmart or Dick's or something and grab a cool-looking paddle or the cheapest paddle. But I was thinking in terms of like the first good paddle you buy.
Yep.
Yeah. If you're 6 months into it and you're starting to become obsessed with pickleball and you want to upgrade your paddle experience, I think a lot of those people migrate to the Anna Lee Waters and Ben Johns. And there aren't that many well-known pros to that level player, I'd say. So it's going to be 2 or 3 pros that are selling the most paddles based on their sponsorship. But yeah, and then eventually, people, a certain subset of people get big into the technical specifications of their paddles and start watching videos like mine and Chris's and Will's and Braden's and, others.
And I think that's where we've seen a big change this year in companies like Ronbus and 6-0 come about. They're doing it without big name pros for the most part.
Yeah.
They're doing it with cutting edge technology, getting the word out through word of mouth, social media, those kinds of things, and there isn't that pull from the professional side.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it doesn't make sense in the business model sense for Rhombus, for example. Even 6-0, they do have Jaume as a pro, but it doesn't make sense for them to spend millions of dollars on a pro at this point because they're known as pushing the envelope in terms of the direction that pickleball's going with their paddle technology. And that's different than having a pro face associated with your paddle. Yeah, all right. Moving on to balls. I was going to do so. I actually recorded with you and Paula and who was Sarah Jenny, I think was the fourth, and the 4 of us played with the Vulcan Ball just before Masters, and that was when they first went on sale. I got one of the first batches, and I recorded us playing with it, and I mic'd us all up. But I was going to do like an initial impressions video, but the mics ended up sounding like total crap, so I had to ditch that video. But let's go ahead and talk about
for the best.
Yeah, there wasn't many profound thoughts on that video, but yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on the Vulcan Ball?
It definitely plays fast. I don't know what the hardness is on that, but I would put it maybe slightly below the Dura in terms of hardness and in weight.
Yeah.
Plays very well. I did notice that after, I don't know, just a few games, it seemed to go out of round. Now, I don't know if that's that particular ball or that lot of ball, but for us at least, the roundness was an issue. But no cracking or anything like that.
Yeah, I agree. I'd say let me pull up my ball database here. I do measure the hardness with a durometer on the balls, and the hardest ball that I've measured is the Dura. That comes in at a short D measurement of 59.3, and the Vulcan Ball is 59.2. So that's within the margin of error. So they're basically the same hardness. I do feel like the Vulcan Ball plays a little softer. It feels a little softer. Maybe it softens up after you're playing with it for a while quicker than the Dura. But I also feel like it feels heavier, and it's not. I weigh them, and they're all basically within a small range of weight. So it's not actually heavier, but it feels a little heavier when you hit it.
Now, when you say heavier, you're that feeling of just holding it in your hand or hitting it against your paddle.
Yeah, hitting it with your paddle. In the hand, it feels the same weight, but when you're hitting it, it just, how some, like the softer balls generally feel heavier, like the Onyx makes one of the real soft marshmallow balls, and that thing always just feels like a brick when it hits your paddle. It just feels like a heavier ball, and it's not. It's the same weight, but yeah, it doesn't feel as heavy as the softer balls, but it does feel a little heavier, I'd say, than the Dura. I'd say it feels about as heavy as a Franklin X40.
I would agree with that.
Yeah,
yep.
Yeah.
And what's the effect on you in terms of that feeling? Do you feel like you're hitting balls along, or a few more out than you normally would?
No, it doesn't bother me in terms of being able to control the ball, but it's kind of the same feeling you get with power versus pop in a paddle. Like when you swing hard at the baseline and hit a hard drive, it seems like you can get more power with a heavier ball.
Yep.
Versus at the kitchen when you're doing these little flicks and things. Seems like you get more pop with a lighter ball. So the Dura seems more poppy to me, and the Vulcan, and again, this is a very subtle difference, feels a little more powerful to me. So there's 2 types of speed, I guess, if you will,
What's the price on those?
Oh, God. They're over $4 a ball for the Vulcans. If you buy them in a 12-pack, they're $4.17 per ball. You know, they just spent millions of dollars on a contract with a PPA. They've got to make that money back. But that's a good segue into an alternative to the Vulcan that I wanted to talk about. I mentioned this in Chris's Discord server also, but looking at these two balls, they look exactly the same. They have almost the same hardness, and they play very similarly. So I'm talking about here the Neoslick Vega 40 ball.
Is that the actual name of it?
Uh-huh.
Neos? I like that.
Yeah, Neoslick is the brand, cool. and Vega 40 is the ball. Guess how much they are per ball if you buy 12 of them?
$3.50.
$1.75.
Okay.
And we hit with both today. Well, could you tell me a difference between the Vulcan and the Vega?
If you took the branding off, I probably would have a very difficult time telling the difference.
Yeah, me too. So there's a budget alternative out there for people wanting to hit with the Vulcan ball but don't want to spend that much money. And I understand the Vulcan needs to make their money back. And I also understand that they made a good ball. I'm happy with the Vulcan ball. It could have gone horribly wrong. Like, there was not a Vulcan ball when they got the contract, as far as I know. And they could have given us the horrible ball. I love the color. It's very bright. And I can see it even as a colorblind person on the court.
That's true. That's vibrant.
Yeah.
For sure.
And so is the Vega 40. It's the same color. And there's some others out there. A lot of people have compared the Vulcan ball to the Core balls as well. They also look almost identical, but the Core is a little softer than both the Vega and the Vulcan, which is an awesome alternative, especially in colder weather, because you're going to break. The Vulcans, I'd say, are definitely more durable in terms of cracking than the Duras, ironically. But they do go out of round. But as with any ball, the harder the ball is, the colder the temperature you're playing in, they're going to break more often. So, if you're playing in, I'd say 40 degrees and below, I wouldn't even go with the Vega 40. I'd go more like a Core or a Franklin, something a little softer.
So, John, we need to experiment a little the next time we play and pull a ball out of the bag. Make sure it's not brand new so we can't see the branding. And we'll try and identify what ball it is based on feel, right?
A blind test.
I think that would be difficult now with so many balls coming out that are kind of in that, I guess, sweet spot between Franklin and Dura.
Right.
In terms of hardness, in terms of playability and weight. I think that's where people want to be.
Yeah.
And that's where manufacturers are targeting. It's getting more and more difficult to differentiate.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, it is. And by the way, if you want to, I actually reached out to the owner of Neoslick to come out with a paddle too, but the producer of the Vega 40 ball, and mentioned, hey, this plays a lot like the Vulcan. I intend to do a review. So he gave me a discount code. It's only 5%, but you can even get 5% off of $1.75 per ball. So it's definitely the cheapest option out there. That's the closest to the Vulcan. And you can use the code Johnkew on that. I think it's just straight up Johnkew.
And these and more balls are in your database.
They are, yes. The database now has 26 different balls in it, and it's growing every day. Not as big as the paddle database, which has 140-something paddles now. It's been a lot of work. It's been a lot of work running metrics on these paddles.
The amount of data out there, incredible.
Yeah,
really.
It's nuts.
So if you are a person who is looking for a ball to keep in your bag, how would you suggest using your database to help narrow down that selection?
Yeah, I think the biggest metric that affects the feel and playability of a ball is the hardness. And I do have a column in the database that is the durometer hardness. And it's just this little machine that, presses almost a needle into the plastic and measures its hardness. And you can get a good sense of, okay, if I like to play with the Franklin ball, I'll look at other balls within that hardness range, and they're going to play similarly. And color, obviously. I also love the new Selkirk ball, but I think one of the downfalls of that ball is the color. It's just hard to see indoors. They didn't get that really bright optic yellow greenish ball that like the new Vulcan. It's a little bit dull. It's a little closer to the old Dura.
It plays very well, though. I really appreciate the consistency of the Selkirk ball, even after. I mean, I think I played with one ball for weeks.
Yeah.
And it's still as consistent as the day it came out of the package.
Yeah. I do feel like they soften up a bit. They go a little bit out of round, too. Not as bad as the Vulcan, I'd say, but more than the Franklin, I'd say. Franklin's a pretty solid ball. You know, it's soft. And you don't want to play with it in the summer in hot temperatures because it turns into a marshmallow. But on cool days, you can't get much better than a Franklin. It doesn't go out of round, doesn't break. And when it's cooler, it's harder. So it plays more like it's not as lively, I'd say, as the Vulcan by any means, but it's solid. Shout out to Franklin. I kind of talked poorly about their paddles in past videos, so they do make good balls, though.
I have played with Franklin balls from the beginning, and always they're very predictable.
Yeah.
In most conditions, and I think that for any ball, that's a pretty high watermark.
Yeah. You know what else is a really good ball that I've never seen anybody play in the wild is the diadem ball.
Never seen it.
Yeah. I asked them to send me some, and they sent them to me, and the diadem Premier Power. Let me pull up the hardness. So the hardness, the durometer of the diadem ball is 58.5 compared to the Dura, which is 59.3. So it's a little less hard, a little softer.
What's the softest ball on your?
Than the Dura. Let me sort this. And it's the Pen 40.
Pen 40.
49.0. So the Pen ball is definitely the softest. The Gamma two-tone training balls are also very soft. PCKL.
Mm-hmm.
I have some of their paddles here. They're actually some of the best-selling balls on Amazon. I don't know how they found their way into that marketplace. But they have a very soft ball too. They've got a few balls. They have a harder ball, but their Optic outdoor ball is 52.8. That's
is Oso still a thing?
Oso is still the thing.
All
Yeah.
right.
Oso Fury, 58.7. It's a good all-around ball. It's $3 per ball when you buy 12, so it's not the cheapest, but all right.
You think we'll see a lot more development in the ball area? It feels like there's room to grow.
You know, I'd love to see more materials considered, some composites, you know, and the plastic to make it more environmental friendly and play well. You know, you can't skimp on the performance of the ball, but I feel guilty playing, particularly when you hit a Dura and you break one every game. You're throwing away so much plastic, and you know, then going through paddles with the polypropylene cores, it just seems like pickleball can be a very wasteful sport in terms of the plastics entering the environment. But I'd love to see a ball that's both durable. I think Selkirk did that with their S1 ball, the new ball. It's extremely durable. I played with, like, they have the lifetime warranty, which is kind of unbelievable, but they do break eventually. But I played with one for,
I think it's a 1-year warranty.
it's a 1-year warranty. Yeah,
Right.
That's right. But I played with one for weeks and weeks. Not all. It wasn't the only ball I played with, but it got a lot of use, and it finally broke in like 40-degree temperatures. So, all right. So we talked about the Proton paddle. We also tried out the Gearbox G2 paddles. I wanted to do a first impressions video on those paddles. They're a new budget line that Gearbox put out, and we're looking at them on the wall over here. They include a kind of shorter, wider paddle, a Fusion. Do you remember what they renamed the Fusion to?
I believe it's Integra.
Integra, that's right. The Fusion
I
is
didn't
now
have
the
a problem
Integra.
with Fusion, so I was okay with that.
I wonder why they did that. Yeah, it was a good name. But now it's the Integra, and they have an elongated. So they have 3 shapes. All of them.
Now, is the more traditional shape based on their old quad?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
Dimensions?
Actually, it is a quad.
Okay.
It's called a quad shape. And
Those kind of came out of nowhere. I feel like no one's been.
yeah,
I haven't seen that anywhere really. And
Right. No, our light went out. Yeah, they haven't been hyped by Gearbox much. They did send me all 3 a few weeks ago, and you and I hit with them on one session just for a few games. They're polypropylene core. They don't have the SST core, the carbon fiber and foam cores. So they're honeycomb polypropylene. They are the surface underneath the texture is a composite of carbon fiber and fiberglass. I have not cut one open to see if it's laid out like directionally in 90 degrees, but the surface texture is a grit. It is very gritty though, and I ran some spin tests on them, and it got top tier, just above 2,000 RPM if I remember correctly. What are your thoughts on playing with them?
I think that once you learn how much they cost, you really like these paddles.
Yeah.
And I did enjoy the spin. The Pro Power that I play with has a lot of spin. I think there's a lot of potential for spin, but sometimes that spin is difficult to harness. With this, it's so easy to hit those slices, forehand, backhand slices, top spin rolls, very easy. Where I had some issues with these paddles is I think the issue that I have with a lot of edgeless paddles, and that is sweet spot and twist. And we didn't get a chance to play around with any lead weights or anything like that. I think that would be an interesting experiment.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot could be gained there. But stock, struggle a little bit finding the sweet spot.
Yeah. Yeah, same. And what did you mean when you said it's kind of difficult to harness the spin on the Raw Carbon Fiber Pro series?
Well, the ball comes off there so fast that I feel like that ball to paddle interface, that dwell time, isn't long enough for a spin to really impart to the ball.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I get it. And I thought maybe we're also talking about kind of the flick spin or the pop spin versus the drive power spin. And I've noticed the different textures of raw carbon fiber. Pickleball Will also talks about this, and he brought it up to me, which made me start thinking about it. But he's totally right. Like the coarser textures of raw carbon fiber get better spin from flicks, and kitchen exchanges. If you're trying to slice a dink or you're doing a roll volley, the coarser raw carbon fiber gets much better spin than the legacy style, really fine raw carbon fiber, which does get good spin with full strokes, like serves and drives, but not so much at the kitchen. So that's a neat distinction, I think, to draw. But I think one caveat with the G2s, going back to them, with the texture is that it is grit glue. Gearbox does typically provide better quality paddles than others, so they're probably curing it to a greater extent. It's probably a little more durable than stuff you're going to find on other paddles with grit. But it is grit, and it generally tends to wear down quicker than raw carbon fiber. So out of the box, yeah, you're going to get pretty amazing spin with these things. But I haven't played with them long enough to know how long that grit stays around.
I think for the price that these are, in the low hundreds?
Yeah, 100 to 130, these paddles.
I can't think of another paddle out there that can really compete.
That's true. I mean, you have the kind of the assurance, the quality assurance that only Gearbox provides. And yes, there have been some issues with the Pro Series paddles that we've heard about, but honestly, looking at these things, they feel super high quality. There's definitely no exposed polypropylene in the handle. They feel like solid paddles. They're actually not that lightweight either compared to some of Gearbox's previous paddles. I think they're all 14 millimeters thick. They're all close to 8 ounces in weight. They're just under, which helps with the sweet spot. My favorite was the wider body of the three.
Quad shape.
The quad shape, yeah, because the sweet spot was just a little wider. The elongated seemed to have issues with twisting in your hands.
The design people at Gearbox have been really killing it lately. I mean, I feel like the Pro Power and now the G2 are, design-wise, aesthetically speaking, some of the prettiest paddles out there.
They are, yeah.
Just smooth and elegant.
Yeah. I don't know why I didn't pick up the Proton paddle earlier when we were talking about designs, but yeah, that's...
What color would you call that, John?
Oh, well, I'm colorblind, so I'm gonna plead the fifth on that. The others are very bright. There's like a lime-colored one. There's a purple one. My wife actually liked the purple one better than this brown one. She said I think we can all agree it's not the prettiest paddle, but the more colorful ones I think some people will like because gives kind of a Stranger Things retro vibe.
My preference is for simple, just clean, elegant, and for me, the Gearbox does it. I think Volair does a great job. There's a bunch of others, and maybe we can have another podcast just on design, but I just like things clean like that.
Yeah, for sure. Volair also has some budget paddles, too. So these are fiberglass, but this is the Corto, which is basically the same shape as the Mach 2 Forza, so the wide body. And man, I loved playing with that Mach 2 Forza when I was reviewing it. I played with it for 2 weeks.
Another great spin paddle.
Oh, so good. Yeah. These are not raw carbon fiber. I think they run close to $100 too. They're fiberglass surface and grit, but they also get really good spin. I feel like Volair is killing it lately with their paddles.
Mm-hmm.
Another one. Before we move on, I wanted to talk about one other paddle we were playing with today, the 11624. That's the brand of the paddle, and the Hurache. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Hurache-X. The owner of this paddle company reached out to me and asked me if he could send me some paddles, and he was very funny, actually. He was like, I own the company 1160, otherwise known as the worst name paddle company in the world. So he's
11624. Let's not confuse it with our Black Diamond.
Exactly. But so he's very conscious that
is that somebody's,
it's a mouthful.
I don't know, birthday, anniversary? What is 11624?
I think I heard, I saw it on Discord that it is a winning lottery ticket number combination. So anyway, so this is a thermoform paddle with raw carbon fiber. So it's a peel ply texture on the surface, 16 millimeters thick. But one of the unique things about it is that the materials beneath the peel ply or the texture are a layer of carbon fiber, a layer of fiberglass, and a layer of carbon fiber. So 3 layers. It's these pre-preg unidirectional fibers, but they're blending carbon fiber and fiberglass. So fiberglass is a little more supple than carbon fiber. Carbon fiber is just more stiff, and the fiberglass, it being more supple, provides more pop and power. So that's why these fiberglass paddles, like the Black Diamond Infinity that I just reviewed, get more velocity off the ball. So we played with it today. What are your thoughts on it?
I need some more time with this one, John. And not because I need more time to evaluate it. It was just so much fun to play with. The long handle, I'm not sure if you talked about the handle length, but it's got plenty of room for that, those twoies.
Yeah. Yeah, I've not entered this. Well, actually, I may have entered it in my database, but it looks to be at least a 5.5-inch handle.
I would say so.
And, just like all 5.5-inch handles, you can overwrap it and get close to 6.
And the sweet spot felt very large to me.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. And it had some pop off the surface, not just pop, but power. Good drives from the baseline.
Yeah.
Good catching game. I didn't feel like I was lacking in, velocity of the balls coming off with punch volleys.
And the touch was on point.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that paddle today.
Yeah.
Wish I could just say the name of it.
I'll never remember it. That's
What's the price point on that one?
All right, they have a control version, which is not this one. It sells for $80, so that's really cheap. Oh wow, it's only $140.
That's amazing. That's a quality paddle.
Yeah, for $140, man. I thought it would be closer to like 6 zeros, like 160, 170, maybe 180. Good stuff.
Keeper.
Doug from Bread and Butter also sent me. He's sent it to several reviewers. The 14 millimeter Filth.
Power.
Yeah, pop. Yeah.
The original had power.
Yeah, the original had power and pop. This one is skewed more towards pop. I played with it just for one game so far. I've only had it a couple of days, so I can't really speak much about it in terms of how I feel about it, but definitely you can feel it has a lighter swing weight. It's more maneuverable in the hands, and that pop you get, as with any other 14 millimeter thinner paddle, is quite noticeable on this. So yeah, it's a pretty smoking paddle in terms of kitchen games. Playing aggressively or even defending yourself with counterattacks at the kitchen are pretty easy with that paddle. Let's move on to the next segment. So goals for 2024. We're still in January, and we can talk about our resolutions. I'm not a big resolutions guy. I generally tend to stay in the gym year round. I see people come in January and February, and they tend to taper off in March. But I don't like to make a lot of resolutions. But I do have a lot of goals, particularly in pickleball this year. So let's talk about those. So Eddie, what are your goals this year?
Well, I tend to put a lot of pressure on myself. Even in rec games, I feel like every point is on the line. And lately, there's just been so much pressure that I haven't been enjoying myself as much as I felt like I used to when playing pickleball. Pickleball used to be, and it should be, joyful. It should be the most fun you've ever had, and it usually is. But I've lost a little bit of that mojo lately, and not really a resolution, but I want to get back to just not putting so much pressure on every game, every point.
Right.
But just enjoying the process, making those incremental improvements if possible, and knowing that sometimes those improvements are slow to come.
Yeah, I like it. It's similar to one of my goals is to be injury-free this year. I had a string of injuries last year, and honestly, my feet were hurting so bad in the summer that it wasn't even fun to play. I was a grouch. My mobility was 50% of what it normally is. And I eventually had a knee injury, which put me out for a few weeks, which was the best thing because it allowed my feet to heal too. So I had plantar fasciitis a couple years ago that led to a tear in the plantar fascia, similar to Tyson McGuffin's injury last year. That put me out for several weeks. And then that kind of inflammation spread in my feet, and I was getting pain in different spots of my feet. Anyway, I got that fixed. I got some cortisone shots, which have helped out enormously. And one of my resolutions this year is to do a lot of work in a lot of mobility training into my workout regimen and maintain my strength. One of the things when you start playing pickleball and become obsessed, that becomes your exercise. And I lost a lot of muscle when I started playing pickleball.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I used to hit the gym pretty hard, and I probably lost at least 10 pounds of muscle. I'm a lot thinner than I used to be in terms of lean mass. But I want to get back in the gym to maintain the strength, but also work on my mobility. I think that goes a long way. I use an app. I've been using it for almost 2 years now called GMB Fitness. And it's kind of like yoga for men. There's a lot of yoga poses in it, but there's also like weird movements that I've never put my body into, and these kind of combinations where you're kind of, twisting around on the floor and doing handstands and, cartwheels and stuff like that. So,
not for me.
Not for you?
Nope.
No, it's really good they have like 10-minute sessions on the app that are 15-minute sessions. I think are the shortest ones, but they're really good to warm up before you go play a match. And that's one of the things, like most of us warm up just warming up for the game, right? Dinking. You go out on the court cold, and no matter how young you are and how supple you are, you're going to injure yourself eventually if you're running around on hard concrete for hours and hours a day, right? So
and then what are we doing post-match?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got to
go into the bar.
As we should be. As we should be. But no, I want to focus on staying injury-free this year, and to bring this back to your original point, that means I'm having a lot more fun too. And yes, the mental game is another thing. I'm hoping to stay consistent with mindfulness meditation this year.
Awesome.
Yeah, I have the Headspace app. I've been using it for a couple of years also. It's hard to stay consistent for me. It's one of those things. I'm usually a very regimented person, but I could not get on a regular schedule with these meditations. But I think that helps me. Getting in a good mental space is hugely important for me. I think some people are naturally skilled at it. You see like Ben Johns and Anna Lee. They're some of the best mental players out there. And they have confidence and they're calm but you get in the wrong headspace and your game just tanks.
It can happen quickly too.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, that's one of my recommendations. If you're having issues with anger on the court or you're just not playing up to what you can play, try the Headspace app.
That's cool.
You
Will
do any meditation?
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
But
you don't need it.
More just naturally reflective
Uh-huh.
at the end of the day or after a particularly challenging match, let's say,
Uh-huh.
and just trying to rethink, why certain reactions occurred.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But speaking of feet, John, I too struggling with foot problems. Not so much during matches or games, but afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Just so much soreness that, like, even going downstairs, I have to go down the stairs backwards sometimes because the my Achilles tendon leading down to my heel and a little bit under the foot was so sore after pickleball. And I've been wearing these insoles. They're called Move Game Day Pro, designed by a couple of basketball pros. And with basketball, all that lateral movement and cutting and sprinting and then dead stop, jumping, that's pickleball.
Yeah.
And these insoles have really changed my feet. And I don't have the pain after matches or the day after a match anymore.
Really?
They're fantastic.
So I'm looking at them now on Amazon. They're $60 for a pair. So not too bad. I mean, for quality insoles. Move Game Day Pro. I'll try them out.
What else you got for the year? What are your goals?
Oh, I do want to drill more regularly. So you and I actually talked about doing it. Like you and I drill quite often, but I'd still say that I'm not at 50% drilling, 50% rec play. I do think we try to work on stuff during our games. I generally have one thing in mind, but sometimes that goes out the window, and when you get frustrated or you're not playing your best. But yeah, drilling more often, and I'm going back to work on some of my fundamentals too. Lately, I've been taking lessons. Actually, I've had 2 lessons so far with Scott Fliegelman at Boulder Pickleball.
Local pro?
Yeah, he's a local senior pro. Oh, I forgot to mention in our podcast section, totally forgot this. One of my favorite podcasts is 4.0 to Pro. So it's Scott Fliegelman. He's a co-host on there with, is it David O'Neill? His last name is O'Neill. He's in California. Scott's here in Boulder. It's a fantastic podcast, and it's like 10 minutes or 15 minutes each podcast, and they talk about a stroke or a technique or a strategy to help you, and that's what turned me on to Scott's game. 4.0 to Pro. Check it out. It's actually becoming really popular, so a lot of people already know about it. Anyway, Scott is a phenomenal coach, teacher. He's been working with me on some things that I should know already, and I'm kind of at that point where I'm like, all right, if I don't fix these core issues, these basics, then it's going to hinder, my progression. I'm not totally obsessed with, I don't intend on becoming a pro. I'm here to have fun doing this, but I also, part of the fun in it is watching your progression, right? You don't want to hinder that. Yeah, that's
What's your racket sports background now that we're kind of getting into this? I'm curious.
Yeah, I played tennis in high school and a little bit in college, not on teams, but dropped off in grad school. I just couldn't find anybody to play with. Nobody wants to play tennis anymore.
Why would they?
How about you? You said racquetball?
Racquetball, some squash in college.
Okay.
Yeah. Have you seen Padel?
Yeah.
That looks cool.
It's huge. I'm going to Saudi Arabia tomorrow. Trying to get this podcast done and some other things. So my real job is an archaeologist, and I have some projects in Saudi Arabia. But the point of this is that Padel is huge in Saudi Arabia. And I take my paddle with me when I go to Saudi, and they do have Padel courts, which are basically the same size as pickleball. So we're able to...
Are people playing pickleball there?
No, they've never seen it. I actually got stopped at the airport with my carry-on luggage. It was back when I was reviewing the Gearbox Pro Power Series. I had that with me in Saudi Arabia. Coming back through the airport, and they stopped me, and they pulled out the paddle, the security, and they're like, what is this? And I'm like, oh, it's a pickleball paddle. I pull out a ball and kind of tapping the ball up and down. I'm like, oh. And they're like, raw carbon fiber? And I'm like,
really?
I'm like, yes, it's a raw carbon fiber. How did you know that? And
Torre?
You're talking to the right guy. Anyway, so Yeah, the Padel's huge.
Looks like fun.
It looks like a lot of fun. I would play
mix
Padel.
of pickleball and racquetball.
All sounds good. You know what I forgot to do? We're going to have a Q&A session, but I forgot to pull any questions from
I got
the
one
videos.
for you.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Because I do look at your videos and I read through the comments. And on your last video on the 6.0 Infinity Black Diamond,
Yeah.
there were some questions, not just on your video, but actually some of the other channels as well had similar questions about the comparisons between the two recent releases from 6.0, the Ruby and the Infinity. So some of your comparisons in your video were with other paddles within the line, but not the Ruby.
Not the Ruby.
So what are your summary points on the differences between the Ruby and the Infinity, and your preferences for one or the other?
So there are two Infinities. There's the double Black Diamond Infinity and the Black Diamond. And the double Black Diamond is a raw carbon fiber. The Black Diamond is raw fiberglass. And again, it's the same layup, but instead of using unidirectional carbon fiber, the Black Diamond Infinity is using unidirectional fiberglass. And then they put the same peel ply texture over it. So the difference between those two is that the fiberglass is more supple and it gets more power, more velocity of the ball coming off the paddle. So comparing those two to the Ruby, the Ruby is, I'd say, it's the plushest feeling 6.0 paddle. It's way plusher to me than the original double Black Diamond and original Black Diamond. The Infinity paddles also play softer. They are more control-oriented than the original Black Diamond series. But I'd say that the Ruby, the Kevlar face, just has more dwell time. It feels different. It feels more plush than even the Infinity versions. So
is that how you define plushness? Is that dwell time feeling?
Well,
we talk a lot about power and pop. We also throw out that term plushness quite a bit.
Yeah.
And what's your sort of working definition of that?
Well, I'm kind of conflating plushness with dwell time. I shouldn't necessarily put those, they're not synonymous, but plushness is just the softness of the paddle face. And it's a feel, and it's very subjective. I've actually started trying to find a way to quantify plushness. And it's definitely not just an issue of the surface hardness. I've measured the surface hardness with a durometer of all the paddles, and some of them that feel stiff have a softer durometer reading than those that feel softer, and vice versa. So it's not just the actual hardness of the face. I think it also has a lot to do with vibrations. Like, would you say the Gearbox Pro series plays plush or soft?
I don't know.
Yeah. It's a tough question, right? It's very subjective. But I do feel like they play softer.
It feels springy.
It's springy.
But I would not necessarily say vibration-free or...
No. But when you hit it on the sweet spot, it certainly has some issues with twisting in the hands when you hit it off center. But let's say you hit it in the sweet spot, dink or drive or serve. What do you feel? Softness versus hardness. Where would you put that on the scale?
I would put it on the softer, more trampoline feeling.
Yeah. I think that's a good point.
And
it's
trampoline-y. It gives that sound as well. That's not that high pitch that you get from some very stiff carbon fiber faces, but it's more muted.
Yeah. And when you measure the surface of the Gearbox Pro with a durometer, it's one of the hardest paddles, actually. So it's not the surface that's giving that plusher feel or the trampoline-y feel.
Right.
I think it's both the core and what the core does. So the core is filled with foam, right? It's these carbon fiber ridges that are infused with foam. So the carbon fiber maintains its integrity and allows it to pass the deflection tests. But the foam reduces the vibration, and it also adds to the power. And then there's that whole floating core thing that the Gearbox Pros have going on, which provides all the extra power. Anyway, I feel like it's the vibration effect in your hand that you're feeling that sends signals to you that, oh, this is a softer feeling paddle or a more brittle feeling paddle. So there's that. And then there's dwell time, which is separate. I do think, going back to our original question, I think the Ruby has more dwell time than any other 6.0 paddle. The Ruby is way more powerful than either one of the Infinity paddles. So these drives, serves from the baseline, overhead slams, putaways, you're going to get a lot more power from the Ruby. It's not as poppy as either one of the Infinity paddles. And I think a lot of that has to do with the heavier swing weight of the Ruby. You just can't whip it as quickly from a stationary, from like a backhand punch, for example. You can't get the speed as quickly as you can with these super lightweight, edgeless design of the Infinities. So most edgeless paddles are going to get great pop, and Infinities are a good example of that. So again, Ruby, more power, less pop than the Infinities. Infinities and the Ruby both have good control, I'd say. So I think that for me, the Ruby is the perfect balance between power and control. It's exactly what I want. I don't feel like I'm lacking in power. I don't feel like I'm lacking in control. Both of those seem exceptional on this. The only thing that I feel like the Ruby's lacking a little bit is the pop. There's always a trade-off. So the Infinities are also good with control, but they don't have the power that the Ruby has. So if you're looking for put-away power and control, I go with the Ruby. If you're looking for aggressive kitchen play, good pop and control, I go with the Infinities over the
Great
the Ruby.
summary, John.
Yeah, thanks. All right, so plans for February. Myself, Chris Olson, Pickleball Will, and Braden from Pickleball Effect are all meeting up in Las Vegas for a secret meeting. I'm not going to provide any details right now, but we're going to make a lot of content. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll have more information on that later.
No, John, come on. You got to give us a little more than that. What's going on?
Well, there will be paddle fittings, and meaning there will be a paddle manufacturer there who is keen on perimeter weighting and fitting paddles to pros, and he will fit each of us to a paddle. And I was joking with the other three that I'm definitely the low man on a totem pole in terms of duper scores. Well, I was joking with these guys that this person is going to fit me with a Z5. It's going to fit everybody else.
We've come full circle in this podcast.
Back to the Z5. Anyhow, so that'll be fun.
So is this a situation where, this outfitter has paddles from all different manufacturers and they're going to find the specs that match your needs, or are they creating their own paddle, or is this a whole new manufacturer?
It's a whole new manufacturer. The company's called Thrive Pickleball, and the owner is really smart. And he's we've had extensive conversations. Another total paddle nerd, and like minds, and he's big into figuring out kind of the balance point and the perimeter weighting needed for particular play styles. And he kind of figured out that pros all tend to gravitate toward a swing weight of about 120, 121, which is pretty high for paddle standards. But there's advantages to having that extra power with the paddle with the higher swing weights. Anyway, I'm giving away some of the too much of the information, so I'll keep some of it secret.
Well, we'll look forward to that, John.
All right. What else, Eddie?
Final Jeopardy question. You ready?
Uh-huh.
All right. We're in a tournament, you and I. We're in the finals. We've made it to the end. It's the last point. The score is 10-10, win by 1. Mm-hmm. But you've just injured yourself again, John. And all you can do is serve.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so we're in timeout. You've got your bag with the usual 50 paddles in it. What paddle do you pull out of that bag to maybe get an ace on this very last service?
Oh, man. Oh, definitely the Gearbox Pro Power elongated.
Pro Power again.
That's weighted up to, mine's almost 10 ounces. It is, yeah. I took off the original grip and put on like a gel grip, and then I have lead tape. So that thing hits like a truck. For sure. And I don't know, though. You get the yips in tournaments, especially at a 10-10, but might as well go for it, right? Pull out the big guns.
Right. So when the game is on the line, you've got one swing left, you're pulling out the Gearbox.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, for sure.
Same. Same. When I catch a hold of that serve.
Oh, God.
It's crazy.
Eddie,
exciting.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
A lot of fun. Can't wait to do this again.
Yep.
Next
on the
week.
other side of Saudi Arabia. 2 weeks from now.
Well, if you get through TSA or the Saudi
If I make
version of
it.
TSA.
All right. Sounds good.
Take care.
Take care.